This is a CNBC original. In this episode of American Greed, he makes millions by hooking customers wanting a better sex life.
The Smiling Bob campaign has to go down as one of the more memorable of the
Dvorak makes illegal charges on the credit cards of thousands of customers.
I was upset and I was angry that they did this to her, put her in this situation.
And later, an investment manager takes on the toughest clients, retired NFL players, and steals their money. $150 million vanishes before the FBI moves in. But when he's tackled for a loss, will his game go into sudden death?
The investors, particularly the NFL investors, were so mad at him.
Millions have seen the commercials featuring the character known as Smiling Bob.
The ads are filled with innuendo about why he's so happy. And of course, by the end of the ad, you know why he's so happy, because he's using Enzyte and he's making all the women in his life very happy.
A little more self-esteem and a very happy missus at home.
Billing itself as the once daily tablet for natural male enhancement,
Everybody knew about Smiling Bob. The product started to show up on the shelves of Walmart and Walgreens and CVS.
the mastermind behind Enzyte's success is Stephen Warshak, a 37-year-old entrepreneur. His supplements business is bringing in just shy of $250 million in revenue. More than 50%. Warshak is living the American dream, but it's all about to come crashing down. Warshak's story begins in Cincinnati, Ohio in 1996. Berkeley Nutraceuticals is hatched in his basement.
Pretty much a shoestring operation. They were working in a basement office. It was him, his mom, on the phone, running credit cards.
People who work with Warshak attest to his sharp business skills and say he can be very persuasive.
I think people who worked with him will tell you he was charismatic. They followed him. They believed in his vision for the company.
Warshak's vision is durable to enhance the lives of millions of men without having to get a dose. Warshak plows most of his money into advertising.
Since their target was men, they would advertise in the back of men's magazines. And I think they had stuff in Outside Magazine, Playboy, Penthouse.
Warshak's early ads are tasteless and make over-the-top claims.
They were kind of crude, sometimes kind of funny. It'll make you flip into the magazine.
These early ads work well enough, but Warshak wants to attract more customers. Enter Smiling Bob. The ads are eye-catching, well-produced, and loaded with innuendo.
When it comes to wood, it always helps to listen to an expert. The Wonders of Wood are brought to you by Enzyte.
Warshak buys time on major cable channels.
That the other herbal supplement companies didn't have. As opposed to finding it on the back of some men's magazine, they're seeing this thing advertised in a very slick way on TV, not unlike the ads for Viagra and other legitimate pharmaceuticals.
Warshak is bringing in approximately $100 million. He rents a large office and warehouse just outside of Cincinnati and increases his staff. Supplements, claiming to do everything from increasing energy to managing weight. There's even a pill to boost women's libidos. But Enzyte is its cash cow. Brian first hears about Enzyte in 2001. He asks that his identity be concealed.
They said it was would basically the blood flow would actually increase the size. The vessels will actually stretch. They said most men experience an increase in length and roundness within 3 to 4 weeks.
The commercials promise a double your money back guarantee if customers aren't completely satisfied.
If you ask 99 out of 100 guys, would you like to? So, I was curious. I thought, well, nothing to lose.
Brian logs on to Berkeley's website and gives his credit card information. He pays $400 for an 8-month supply of Enzyte. Customers like Brian are keeping Berkeley in business. And business is good. Very good. President and CEO Stephen Warshak has struck gold.
He had a great business sense. He was a genius at marketing. He knew exactly what it took to get customers into the fold.
Warshak may know how to attract customers, but can he keep them happy? Brian becomes disgruntled.
The first shipment was actually incomplete. They sent me only just a partial shipment.
Brian eventually gets the rest of his order, but on his credit card statement the following month, he sees Berkeley has charged him an additional $122. But Brian has already paid in full. Now he is out $522. Brian
Plus that. The following month, it had not been taken off, so I call him up again. Well, it takes a while to get these things processed. Could be a few weeks. Third month, same thing.
Brian calls customer service repeatedly over the next 6 months before the charges are finally taken off his credit card. Adding to Brian's frustration, after taking Insight for 8 months, he says it doesn't.
Yeah, I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe it would take longer for me. I didn't know. Nothing happened. No, there's no change at all.
Brian contacts the Better Business Bureau and learns he's not alone. Several hundred consumer complaints have been filed against Berkeley.
This was something of a Jekyll Hyde operation that, on one hand, it looked like a legitimate operation with, at the same time, you had, with that kind of volume of complaints, you knew that something was wrong here.
When American greed continues, Berkeley's business practices attract unwanted attention from the media and the feds.
Federal prosecutors, the Postal Service, the FBI, everybody started jumping in.
They're all wondering, are... In 2003, 37-year-old Stephen Warshak's company, Berkeley Premium Nutraceuticals, is making $100 million in annual sales. Its male enhancement pill, Insight, is the top-selling sexual enhancement supplement on the market. Warshak appears to be a success story. Behind closed doors at Berkeley's corporate headquarters, it's another story.
The impression of the company from an outsider or somebody new, you think, oh, what a nice company. This is nice, and they pay me every week.
John Bradley works in the call center.
All of a sudden, the phones would ring, and you knew at that time your free sample, because everything would light up as far as telephone calls and noise.
Call center employees read from scripts which explain Berkeley's so-called continuity program. It's an agreement stating customers will keep receiving the product and be billed for it unless they call to cancel.
Once you get your free sample, if you don't call on the supply, we had to tell them that if they didn't call and cancel, they would automatically be billed.
The continuity program is essential to Warshak's business. He sends numerous emails to his top executives stating that automatic monthly billing is the lifeblood of the company. Initially, John is impressed with
this man because the phones were ringing off the hook. I personally thought that he was a very bright guy, and I just thought he was a go-getter.
Soon, Bradley is promoted to shift leader in the customer service department. That's when he starts to suspect something isn't right at Berkeley. Customer service reps are reporting a high volume of calls.
And you're almost on a first-name basis with the people calling in.
The problem? They're getting Insight, and they don't want it. Customers try to cancel, but their credit cards are still being charged. In most cases, the amounts are between $100 to $200. And month after month, their losses are starting to pile up. The continuity program has become a scam.
Full credit. And he would say, oh, I wasn't aware. I wasn't aware of that. He was aware. He knew. But he was a real bright guy. So I knew he knew.
Warshak attributes the botched credits to typical growing pains of a company that expanded as quickly as Berkeley had. He assures John Michigan residents Ellie and Bob Price come to know all about Berkeley's continuity program. In 1995, 29-year-old Ellie learns she has to have major surgery.
She's getting cysts on her ovaries, so she had to get a complete hysterectomy.
Her hormone levels decrease, and with them, her sex drive.
And I would just tell her, don't worry about it. It's okay. Once we get this thing figured out with the hormone replacement, I'm sure things will be fine.
But Ellie becomes frustrated. Then, in 2003, she hears an ad for Avlamel on the radio, the Berkeley product that claims to boost women's libido. Ellie orders
A sample pack to try the product and see if she liked it. If she liked it, she could order more after that, and that they needed the debit card number just for shipping and handling.
But Ellie believes Avlamil does nothing. Since she doesn't call back to order more, she's surprised to get another package the next month. And the next month. Each time, an automatic withdrawal in the amount of 30. Ellie calls Berkeley several times and gets nowhere, so Bob steps in.
I explained the situation. I told them that whatever they had done was fine. That, just if they would stop sending the product, that we wouldn't worry about it any further.
But the monthly charges keep piling up for Bob and Ellie and countless other customers. Our building, with thousands filed at the Better Business Bureau. Cincinnati Magazine illustrates Berkeley's troubles with a comic strip.
Berkeley was considered the worst offender in the area of business practices.
The uproar causes several federal agencies to take action, with the U.S. Postal Inspection Service leading the team up and begin a criminal investigation. Their focus? Berkeley's illegal billing practices.
Continuity in and of itself is not illegal. What Berkeley did was they set up a continuity program that didn't disclose that it was a continuity program.
Berkeley sets up several roadblocks when people try to cancel. Callers are asked to provide documentation
Documenting your sexual history in order to get a credit? Something wrong there. Who's going to do it? You just say, forget it.
Some callers are told to contact Berkeley's Vice President of Customer Service, Michael Johnson. There's just one problem. Mr. Johnson doesn't exist.
I didn't know who Michael Johnson was. People to take the calls that they were taking the calls from Michael Johnson. Later, I figured out there wasn't a Michael Johnson.
In other cases, unsatisfied Enzyte buyers are asked to submit notarized letters from their doctors, verifying that their penises haven't grown. Ellie Price, who takes Berkeley's female sex enhancement product.
The gentleman on the phone told me that before they could take my wife off this supplemental treatment, that I would have to have her go to a doctor, get a physical, and get a clearance. And my response to him was, did you have a doctor put her on this treatment?
Bob knows Berkeley is scamming them, and the circumstances are starting to take a toll on his marriage.
We had arguments over the situation. I was upset and I was angry that they did this to her, put her in this situation.
In 2003, Stephen Warshak and several of his top executives are served with subpoenas. A short time later, Warshak begins to raid Berkeley's coffers. From January to November 2004, he deposits $7.7 million, another $16.5 million into a personal account.
He was just very arrogant about it. Somehow or another, he thought that he was going to get through it all and be able to pick up where he left off, and that these charges would magically go away.
When American greed returns, will Warshak and his arrogance be able to avoid prison? On March 16, 2005, with a search warrant in hand, 50 armed agents from the U.S. Postal Inspection Service, FBI, IRS, and FDA descend on the headquarters of Berkeley Premium Nutraceuticals.
They brought in boxes of files and computers and hard drives and hauled them off to a secure location.
Officials removed 7 tons of evidence, including 24 laptops, computer hard drives, marketing plans, even the unopened mail. In all, the government takes 13,500 documents. The raid results in a 112-count indictment against 14 of the company's executives, including Warshak, his mother, his sister, and his brother-in-law, are charged with federal crimes including fraud and money laundering. Federal authorities believe that between 2001 and 2006, Warshak and his top execs took $100 million without customers' consent by repeatedly billing their credit cards for
Government. The company went beyond just making it difficult for people. It directly tried to mislead people. It went to great lengths to keep people from returning product. And most importantly, it went in and took charges on people's credit cards without permission. And that was a huge problem for them to get past.
In January 2008, Stephen Warshak goes on trial. Warshak's lawyers assert that all charges can be attributed to mistakes made when a company grows from $0 to $200 million in less than 8 years.
Warshak's entire argument was that this company was growing so fast, we just couldn't keep up with some of the problems that were developing. We did our best, we worked hard to fix it, but sometimes we didn't quite do as well as we should have done.
I don't think that you accidentally start ripping people off and scamming them. I think that
In the end, it's a mountain of damning emails, impossible to defend, that would ultimately bring Warshak down. In one email, Warshak writes, "I don't care if the card is taken from Grandma's purse so Junior can buy some insight. If the card is good, I want a ship." But the most damning email is written by Warshak's nephew, Jason Kosman. Customers. He suggests that after customers cancel their orders, company reps call them back pretending to represent a hospital offering a cheaper and more effective product. The poor customer bites, Kosman writes, thinking he's getting a better deal, but he's actually getting taken for a second time. Kosman goes on to write, "The scheme is beautiful. Customers are fish in a barrel, man. Exploit the shit out of them."
This is what the company was about. It wasn't about selling a product, it was about exploiting people.
Warshak has forwarded the email to 5 Berkeley employees. In the subject line, he's written, "The student has become the teacher. Our company was built on this kind of creative thinking. Thanks for the wake-up call, Jason." The trial is a joke.
I think the issue for federal prosecutors became, this is in the middle of all of this, uproar going on about the company, and yet he's still telling people that this is the kind of thinking that we want to embrace. The prosecutors made a pretty strong case that his actions supported what he said in that email.
On February 22, 2008, Stephen Warshak and money laundering. Judge Arthur Spiegel, who presides over the case, says Warshak was motivated by greed.
The judge made a point to say that not only is he taking money from people, but he's preying on their insecurities. And that seemed to bother the judge, that this was something that he knew he could exploit.
While most of his top executives have got it so easily, he's ordered to pay $494 million in forfeiture, and he's sentenced to 25 years in federal prison.
25 years is a long time, especially again when you consider that no one lost everything. Nobody lost a fortune here. Nobody went bankrupt, but this was petty theft on a...
Bob and Ellie Price never recovered their losses, but for Bob, it wasn't just about the money.
the money wasn't really the thing that motivated me. It was the way I was treated by these people, and it was what they did to my wife.
Berkeley customer Brian decides to take his fight one step further. He takes part in a class action civil lawsuit against $1 million.
I was awarded $17,000. I'm glad they had to pay me. I'm glad they had to pay the other people in the class. You know, they're counting on people putting their money down and not saying anything about it. I actually decided to stand up to these guys and say, hey, this is wrong. I don't care what kind of embarrassment I have to go through. I'm going to get my money back from you guys.
Enzyme harmful to consumers, just Berkeley's business practices. A new company called Vianda has purchased Enzyme. And Smiling Bob, he's still on the air eliciting chuckles.
Looks like it's all first class from here.
And helping to rake in millions. Atlanta, a southern boomtown where people know how to enjoy the finer things in life. But even here, the lavish wedding party thrown by hedge fund superstar Kirk Wright was a bit over the top.
There were, bars carved out of ice, 3 of them where you could have champagne and lobster and sushi.
It goes on even as Wright's hedge fund is on the brink of collapse.
Only a sociopathic personality can conduct himself in that manner.
The wedding party is Kirk Wright's last tango. When Wright exits the stage, he leads the FBI on a national manhunt. Kirk Wright grows up in the Bronx, New York.
Himself up by the bootstraps. He wasn't born into affluence or anything like that.
He came into a little bit of money because, unfortunately, he had a bad car wreck. And there was a settlement from that. And he initially started investing that money when he was, 19 and 20.
The settlement from the car wreck also helps put him through graduate school. he gets a master's degree from Harvard. Wright forms International Management Associates, or IMA, to operate hedge funds. Calvin Paris, the father of one of Wright's Harvard classmates, invests $100,000 with Wright in November 1999.
I got into his investments for the month of December. And when I got my monthly market value, 40.
An unbelievable increase in 1 month. The market is hot, but Wright's return is astronomical. Wright's financial prowess does not go unnoticed.
He got introduced through mutual friends and investors to these two guys in Atlanta who were anesthesiologists who had an entrepreneurial bent and were looking for a place where they could branch out a little bit more from the business of being.
Not only invested, they persuade Wright to relocate to Atlanta.
The city had grown by a third in population from 1990 to 2000. There was a lot of business opportunity, but there was a very high cultural comfort level for people who were black and young professionals.
As it turns out, the 30-year-old is in the right place at the right time.
There was a lot of very, very few that were run by African Americans. So in some ways, there was a need that was just waiting to be met here by somebody like Kirk Wright.
The two doctors used their contacts to tap professionals like themselves, people with ample wealth and little time or expertise to manage it.
So when people like Mr. Wright are able to come to him and use terms, margin calls and short sales. Heard that word before? They might not completely understand it, but they think, well, he's using the right terms.
But even savvy investors get hooked as well. In 2001, Los Angeles-based real estate developer Roger O'Neill agrees to meet with Wright.
He seemed like a very knowledgeable, articulate guy, and that he told me a little bit about his background. In the year 2002, I had pretty much liquidated most of my portfolio with my investment group and transferred it over to International Management Associates.
Eventually, O'Neill has $13 million in IMA accounts. Little do he and other clients know, a portion of their money is being drained off.
An enormous amount of money, over $10 million, was basically the defendant's own purse account.
But Wright appears to deliver the goods. Statements from his Taurus fund trumpet annual returns as high as 20%. Returns that high attract plenty of attention. Wright continues to work his game.
Mr. Wright was able to get 2 NFL football players who were retired to come and work for him. We're in the NFL to also invest.
One of Wright's new hires is former Denver Bronco defensive star Steve Atwater. He convinces other players to buy in, and Wright does the rest. None of the NFL players involved would talk to American greed. The experience with IMA is an embarrassment they want to put behind them. Ripped off. Kirk Wright is about to get blitzed. Atlanta hedge fund manager Kirk Wright is building a financial empire. He claims to have a secret recipe for stock market success.
That's the classic conundrum of hedge funds. How much transparency do you have to have for your investors versus giving away your secrets?
International Management Associates grows to $84 million, all under Kirk Wright's personal management. He lavishes attention on investors and potential clients.
He was flying people out for football games here at the Georgia Dome, showing them that he was a successful businessman.
He is spending on himself, too. There is a new house for his wife and son.
When they purchased it, the front looked about like it does now. However, the entire back, 20 feet or something, did not exist. And they spent 5.5 years and a great deal of work. They added marble floors, gold fixtures.
His garage is filled with luxury cars, a Bentley, a Jaguar, an Aston Martin, a BMW, and a Lamborghini. It's an almost cartoonish version of modern success. But his home life is not picture perfect. In 2003, his wife files leave, and she doesn't want to be a part of this new life. On the business side, some clients are wary of Wright as well. Calvin Paris asks a lawyer to evaluate him.
He came into the office with Kirk, and he walked out feeling that everything was okay. I came away with reassurance of any doubt.
From new investors, To keep IMA's statements looking solid, he resorts to something beyond creative accounting.
He just made them up. He just took a template off of the internet that the brokerage companies provided to the investors so that you could track your own investments. He filled it out, sent those in, and passed them off as actual statements.
According to the government, talking into letting them form a more transparent division of the company. During its creation, an accountant uncovers something shocking. While Wright was reporting more than a 3% gain in two of his funds, the company had actually lost value to the tune of 24%. The staff demands answers.
The core group of there, Kirk Wright just wouldn't disclose any details. And things became very acrimonious very fast after that point.
Wright tries to calm them with a $155 million account statement. But he won't let any of them examine the document. Atwater and other insiders start planning exit strategies.
It's never been completely disclosed. Soon after that, a tip came into the SEC that something was awry at IMA.
But Wright clearly thinks the best thing to do is pretend nothing's wrong. On October 22nd, 2005, he and his second wife throw that over-the-top wedding.
He had to know that spending $500,000 on a wedding,
The honeymoon is soon over. In December, Wright starts to give investors the runaround.
Payments had been missed, checks had been bounced, and investors had started to become very concerned that the money just was not there.
and that was the point where Atwater said he just felt physically sick. He knew that something was desperately rent in on this, and it was getting ready to break very bad.
In an interview with Bloomberg News, Atwater states, "In my wildest dreams, I never thought he was stealing the money." 2006 arrives in a downward spiral. Investors get no further than the receptionist when they call.
I asked her, what's going on? And she said, oh, everything's fine. Just a little stress. Your money's safe.
By February 2006, Kirk Wright will flee Atlanta. Next, with the feds on his trail, will Wright take the money and run? Or will he take a permanent vacation? National Management Associates of Atlanta still looks like a good investment. Its manager, Kirk Wright, claims the company has more than $150 million under management. That month, retired businessman Alan Ehrlich follows up on a tip to check IMA out.
I read all the paperwork, I called people for references, and everything checked.
Invested with IMA. In Atlanta, everything is about to go down the drain. Investors who want payments are getting the runaround.
Throughout the month of January, unfortunately, Kirk gave me excuse after excuse of his business, that it was year-end, they were putting together all their tax information, that the operations had a lot of ongoing activity.
Current NFL players band together to demand their money. Kirk Wright stonewalls them.
Mr. Wright told the players, you'll get your money next month. Oh, I've had a problem with the banks, it'll be the next month. And then finally in February, they realized they probably weren't going to get their money.
On February 17th, the players go to court. A judge quickly freezes IMA's assets. Those charges they've been working on as well. When the FBI raids IMA's office, Wright's computer is missing. So is he.
Well, it's not exactly road rage, but there was living room rage. You know what we heard now.
The FBI and the SEC move in to recover what they can of IMA's assets. But there is less than
Hundreds of forensic accountants who had seen Ponzi schemes before. They found surprisingly little. They found the physical office desks, chairs, valuables at the office, file cabinets. They didn't find much more at all.
In the meantime, the FBI is hunting the man responsible. For 3 months, they chase every lead and check every with a twist. While in hiding, Kirk Wright is giving interviews to the Wall Street Journal.
He was calling us from a cell phone that was non-traceable, throwawayable, but still saying, well, I'm not on the run. I don't have anything to hide. I'm just being careful of my movements.
Mr. Wright's explanation for that is that the investors, particularly the NFL, invest safety.
It was highly unusual to be reading about conversations in the paper that a fugitive is having with a reporter claiming not to be a fugitive when at the same time we are doing everything we can to locate him.
Even on the run, white-collar criminals typically maintain the lifestyle to which they have become accustomed. That is certainly true of Kirk Wright, lounging in the lap of luxury.
And at the time of his arrest, he was laying by the pool at the Ritz-Carlton on South Beach in Miami.
By all accounts, didn't appear incredibly surprised to be found. He was just riding out the remaining days until, the web did actually tighten in on him.
The 35-year-old is checked in to different accommodations. On trial for 47 counts of fraud and money laundering. Former partners testify against him.
His basic defense is that his losses were basically legitimate trading losses. We always had a dispute with everyone, the government, the SEC, the bankruptcy trustee, as to what the total amount of the loss was.
This was a defendant who may be a salesman, and that's what we argued to the jury that he was trying to do, basically to them, was sell them a story.
The government wins the argument. On May 21st, 2008, Kirk Wright is convicted on all counts. The man who so recently was on top of the world seems to take the verdict with composure.
We met with him 15 or 20 minutes after that. And he seemed pretty upbeat at that point for someone who had just lost a wound.
Knows it could run into hundreds of years.
On one level, this is a very proud and confident person that is hard to imagine spending the rest of their life in jail with no possibility of ever getting out, and no quality of life that resembles the affluence and riches that they had.
At the jail, he is placed on a... The guards don't watch him 24 hours a day. 3 days after his conviction, Wright ties one end of a bedsheet around his neck and the other around the top bunk in his cell. By the time the guards make their next check, Wright has made his final exit. He is dead. And so are his client's last hopes of recovering much money from the fraud.
Is for him to basically get a reduced sentence based upon the cooperation of letting the authorities know who else was involved and where the money went. I would say that, Kirk, he ruined lives. I mean, there's 500 investors.
A few assets, Wright's house, cars, and...
I don't know that there's a final answer to that question right now as to how much folks are getting back or can expect to get back, except that I think, as everyone knows, it's likely not to be anything close to 100 cents on the dollar.
His second wife is allowed to retrieve only her personal possessions before the house is auctioned off. Investors are simply out of luck. 71-year-old, his wife had to return to work, and now he lives in a rented condo.
This was money that, you plan on for the rest of your life, and you're going to earn a certain return, and then you can live, and that changed, obviously.
Other investors think Wright's suicide was his final selfish act. The case of justice denied.
I wanted to visit him. I wanted to visit him in prison, and I wouldn't. I would have been at the sentencing, so I got robbed. I got robbed, figuratively and literally.
Normally pumps to the body. This is the right ventricle that pumps to the lungs. As you can see here, the right ventricle is much larger than the left ventricle, almost 3 times the size. This heart is... As a physician who treats these people, I can only tell you how agonizing this illness is. Patients will describe it as slowly drowning. It is the worst disease, worse than cancer. It's not only is it bad, it's the way they die and how they suffer that's so miserable.
In 1996, Dr. Rich co-authors an article in the New England Journal of Medicine. Drug for just 3 months brings a
woman who wanted to lose 20 pounds for her wedding dress. She was only on these drugs for a few weeks, developed all the symptoms. Found the same thing. They combined their discoveries. Redux was voluntarily withdrawn from the market.
Hundreds of thousands of people who never had heart problems before are now being diagnosed with valve damage. For Jacqueline McMurtry, who takes Fen-Phen for well over a year, it comes as a huge surprise.
The only way that I ever knew that I had heart valve, and it clearly showed it, and then the doctor listened to my heart, and he found a murmur, And then I told him that I had been experiencing some difficulty breathing.
W.L. Carter has valve damage as well, though not as severe.
It was expensive. I took the monthly dosage and cut it in half because my drug used a month to last 2 months, and it probably wound up saving my life.
Within months of the drug recall, there are hundreds of lawsuits from coast to coast. American Home Products, the maker of the diet drug, ends up paying billions of dollars in...
There were ads on television about PPH, and you Googled it on the internet. The first 2 pages were law firms' ads for clients with PPH. It was unbelievable because there was so much money to be made here.
Somewhere in there were many lawyers who actually wanted to get those clients enough money to live out their lives in peace or to cover their health care costs, cover their kids if they were likely to die. But
when American Greed returns, 3 attorneys in Kentucky see the Fen-Phen settlement as their ticket to riches. How much they steal from their clients will shock you.
I would rather take a thief in the middle of the night in my living room, armed only with bare hands and my wits, than an unethical lawyer that uses my trust and his law degree as a weapon.
Fen-Phen. When it hits market, it was hailed as a godsend, a new and easy way to control weight. Then, disaster. Researchers warned that Fen-Phen could damage heart valves.
In the mid-90s, millions of Americans looking to lose weight line Fen. When she hears the news of the settlement, she's happy. But it's not exactly like winning the lottery.
I felt good about it, but, you know, when somebody tells you that you could get quite a bit of money, you're still real apprehensive. And so when you don't know anything about any money, you're going to trust this person that's helping you.
Almost immediately.
Goes out of the attorney's escrow account into their personal accounts before a dime is ever paid to a single.
Is not so good in these cases because in the end you're talking about somebody with a family. It's somebody's life, and all it was companies, lawyers, and somewhere in there patients who just dropped through the cracks.
Coming up on American Greed, lawyers who are supposed to get contingency fees of slightly more than 30% end up taking a whopping 75%.
A case that basically made people start saying, "You're a tort lawyer? Geez, you couldn't get..."
40 people harmed by the diet drug Fen-Phen look to
dollars for my condition. And I said, "But that's too little." I said, "I've been told by my own doctors that I've got a heart murmur here. It could possibly get worse. And how could I afford a heart valve transplant on $75,000? And would you please go back and renegotiate for more?" And he said, "No, we can't." Motor company Bridgestone tire case.
In 2004, a Lexington attorney named Angela Ford gets a visit from another client of Cunningham, Gallion, and Mills, who has serious concerns about the way the lawyers are handling the settlement.
The odd thing about my meeting with her is that she didn't have any documentation about her settlement. And I thought, well, this is just a client who didn't the attorneys.
But when she calls the lawyers, she has a whole different take. Turns out they're refusing to let anyone see the settlement.
What you expect if you call a lawyer and say, look, I have a former client, they have some questions about how their settlement was handled, could we sit down and try and get those questions answered and I can pass on the information? That's not what happened here. And was told that no information would be provided about the settlement.
Ford talks to other plaintiffs and learns this is no isolated case. Not one of them is given details of the settlement.
That's the most basic thing that you're supposed to do when you settle a client's case. Give them a rundown of what the settlement amount was, what your fees are, and what amount is being paid to the clients.
The only thing they know is contingency fees of slightly more than 30% plus expenses, and the clients are supposed to split the rest. So Angela heads to the courthouse on a fact-finding mission.
And what I discovered was that in 2001, after the settlement, the clients had only been paid approximately $45 million out of a $200 million settlement.
In other words, as Ford digs...
You tell anybody, you could go to jail, they could come back, fine you, and take every penny.
That's extraordinary. For an attorney to tell a client that they could be held criminally, it's beyond ridiculous that a lawyer would tell their client that they can't share info with their children. So a lot of the clients were just mystified.
And not nearly as well off as they should be.
Coming home that day, I got so sick that I actually stopped on Sad Bluegrass Park.
Thoroughbred horses, but their luck is about to run out. Fen, William Gack, Shirley Cunningham, and Melbourne Mills have won a 200
and hook, line, sinker on that one because I believed in the charities, and she assured $20 million was what we were talking about.
$20 million that ends up back in the lawyers' pockets, but not directly. They create a charity with the stated purpose of helping people with health problems.
And at that time, the judge asked Mr. Gallion, do your clients know that you're intending to put 20
could be committed to charity? All those who have signed releases have authorized to do the same.
Never, never.
Turns out the fund provides a healthy living for them. The lawyers appoint themselves directors of the fund and take a monthly salary of $5,000 per person, plus expenses.
It's just unbelievable. That fund for healthy living was not a charity for other people. And for them to come out and say that they wanted to give it for these noble purposes is laughable.
I couldn't believe what was going on. They've set themselves up for a nice retirement at our expense.
When American greed returns, some of the lawyers trade their horse farms in Kentucky for hard bunks in federal prison. In Lexington, Kentucky, lawyers who were supposed to be looking out for victims of the weight loss drug Fen have raided their client's settlement award. Ultimately, they walk off with $126 million.
These lawyers, $60 million, but that wasn't enough.
Half of many of the victims.
This was just not money to go on vacations with and to live fancy lifestyles with. This was to pay doctor bills, drug bills, operations, medicines, and
The Architecture of Greed, Volume 1, The Smile and the Suit. Prologue, The Cost of a Dream. The air in Cincinnati often smelled of the river damp, heavy, and full of secrets. In 1996, in a basement that felt more like a tomb than a corporate headquarters, Stephen Warshak sat huddled over a folding table. The hum of a single computer fan was the only heartbeat in the room. Beside him, his mother balanced a rotary phone against her shoulder, scribbling credit card numbers onto a yellow legal pad. They were selling hope, not the kind of hope you find in a church or a textbook, but the desperate, quiet hope that keeps men awake at 3 a.m. Stephen looked at the labels of the bottles stacked against the concrete wall. They were cheap, the plastic thin and translucent. But the names were gold. Berkeley Nutraceuticals. It sounded established. It sounded Ivy League. It sounded like it didn't belong in a basement. The student, Stephen whispered to himself, watching his mother close another sale, is about to become the teacher. He didn't know then that his teaching would eventually be valued at $250 million, or that the cost of his tuition would be 25 years of his life. Chapter 1, The Gospel of the Pill. By 2001, the basement was a fever dream of the past. Stephen Warshak stood at the window of his glass-walled office, looking out over the Cincinnati suburbs. He was 37, his hair perfectly coiffed, his suits tailored to hide the nervous energy that powered his every move. Below him, the warehouse hummed with the efficiency of a beehive. Thousands of bottles of Insight, the once daily tablet for natural male enhancement, were being boxed and shipped. The crude ads have to frame. The back of the magazine stuff. It makes us look like we're selling X-rated films in a brown paper bag. Stephen turned, a predatory glint in his eye. Men are simple creatures. They want to be bigger, stronger, happier. We just need to give them a face for that happiness. A face! A smile! Stephen corrected. A smile that says everything without saying a word. And so, Smiling Bob was born. The campaign was a stroke of dark genius. It didn't feature doctors in white coats or graphs of blood flow. Instead, it featured Bob, a middle-aged man with a whistle in his step and a grin that stretched from ear to ear. The neighbors looked at him with envy. The postman gave him a knowing nod. The innuendo was thick enough to choke on, yet clean enough for primetime cable. It's about self-esteem, Stephen told his executives during a board meeting. He paced the room like a Pentecostal preacher. We aren't selling a supplement. We're selling the missus at home being happy. We're selling the feeling of being the man you were at 18. And we're going to put it on every channel from ESPN2. The History Channel. The revenue didn't just grow, it exploded. $100 million, $150 million, $250 million. But as the money poured in, the soul of Berkeley Nutraceuticals began to rot. Chapter 2. The Continuity Trap. Ryan was a 30-year-old guy with a good job and a nagging sense of inadequacy. He saw the Smiling Bob ads while watching a late-night rerun. The W or money back guarantee felt like a safety net. A clicked order on the sleek website authorized a one-time payment of $400 for an 8-month supply, and waited. 3 weeks later, the shipment arrived. It was incomplete, just a glitch, Ryan told himself. But the next month, his bank statement showed a charge he hadn't authorized. $122. Then another. He called the customer service line. He was put on hold for 40 minutes, listening to a jaunty jingle that sounded suspiciously like the music from the commercials. When a woman finally answered, her voice was a monotone wall of resistance. "I want to cancel," Ryan said, his voice trembling with a mix of embarrassment and anger. "I'm sorry, sir," the voice replied. "You're enrolled in our continuity program. It's the lifeblood of the treatment. To cancel, we need a notarized letter from your physician certifying that the product has not worked." Ryan froze. "A notarized letter? About my private life?" "Correct, sir." "Or you can speak to our Vice President of Customer Service, Michael Johnson." "Fine. Put him on. Mr. Johnson is currently in a meeting. He will call you back." Michael Johnson never called back because Michael Johnson didn't exist. He was a ghost created by Stephen Warshak, a name on a script designed to funnel angry men into a void where their money disappeared and their pride kept them silent. Chapter 3, The Ghost in the Machine. Inside the Berkeley call center, the air was thick with the sound of ringing phones. John Bradley, a shift leader, watched the lights on the console blink like a panicked Christmas tree. He knows, doesn't he? A young rep whispered to John, nodding toward the executive suite. The customers are screaming. We're charging cards that were canceled months ago. John looked away. He liked his paycheck. He liked the go-getter energy Stephen radiated. It's just growing pains, John said, repeating the corporate line. We grew too fast. The software can't keep up. But John had seen the emails. Stephen's messages were masterpieces of arrogance. I don't care if the card is taken from Grandma's purse so Junior can buy some Zeit. One red. If the card is good, I want to ship. Then came the email from Jason Kosman, Stephen's nephew. It was the wake-up call. The scheme is beautiful. Jason had written, customers are fish in a barrel. Man, exploit their shit out of them. We call them back pretending to be a hospital, offer them a cheaper version, and they bite. We take them for a second time. Stephen's reply was the nail in his own coffin. The student has become the teacher. Our company was built on this kind of creative thinking. While Stephen was depositing $24 million into his personal accounts, the U.S. Postal Inspection Service was beginning to box their own evidence. Chapter 4, The Raid. March 16, 2005. The morning was cold. 50 armed agents, FBI, IRS, FDA, and postal inspectors descended on the Berkeley headquarters like a tactical strike team. They didn't knock. Stephen Warshak watched from his glass office as 7 tons of his life were hauled away in cardboard boxes. Laptops, hard drives, marketing plans, even the unopened mail from desperate men asking for their money back. The arrogance didn't leave him immediately. Even during the trial in 2008, he sat with a smirk, his lawyers arguing that it was all a big misunderstanding a company that grew too fast for its own ethics. But the emails didn't lie. Judge Arthur Spiegel looked down at Warshak from the bench. You didn't just take money, the judge said, his voice echoing in the silent courtroom. You preyed on the insecurities of men. You built an empire on shame. The sentence was a hammer blow. 25 years, $494 million in forfeiture. Smiling Bob was still on the air, a digital ghost of a man who didn't exist, selling a pill that didn't work for a man who was now sitting in a 6x9 cell. Chapter 5, The Harvard Man. While Stephen Warshak was perfecting the art of the pill, a man named Kirk Wright was perfecting the art of the pedigree. Kirk didn't come from money. He grew up in the Bronx, where the shadow of the elevated train was the only thing that gave you cover. But Kirk had a secret weapon, a car accident settlement from his youth. While other kids bought sneakers, Kirk bought stocks. By the time he reached Harvard, he wasn't just a student. He was a brand. Investment is about narrative, Kirk told his classmates over drinks at a Cambridge bar. He was articulate, knowledgeable, and possessed a cultural comfort that made him a unicorn in the world of high finance. People don't invest in funds. They invest in the person running them. In 1999, he formed International Management Associates (IMA). One of his first investors was Calvin Paris, the father of a classmate. Calvin put in $100,000. A month later, the statement arrived. $140,000. A 40% return in 30 days. It's the secret recipe. Kirk whispered when Calvin called, breathless, "Don't tell too many people. The market is a jealous mistress." But Kirk wanted everyone to know. He moved to Atlanta, the southern boomtown. He wasn't just looking for money. He was looking for the elite. He was looking for the people who had everything to lose. Chapter 6. The Gridiron Trap. Atlanta was a city of heat and ambition. Kirk Wright fit in perfectly. He was a young, black professional in a city hungry for success stories. He targeted the anesthesiologists, the doctors, and then the biggest prize of all, the NFL players. Steve Atwater, the Denver Broncos legend, was a man built of muscle and discipline. He was the kind of man who didn't trust easily. But Kirk Wright had the Harvard degree. He had the Bentley. He had the 20% annual returns. It's about the post-game life. Steve, Kirk said, sitting in his lavish office filled with gold fixtures and marble floors. The league doesn't take care of you forever. IMA does. Atwater invested. Then he brought in his teammates. Before long, $150 million was flowing through IMA. Kirk lived the life of a sun god. A $500,000 wedding with ice bars carved into the shape of lions. Sushi flown in from Tokyo. Lobster and champagne flowing like water, while his hedge fund was, in reality, a hollow shell. The secret recipe was simple. Kirk was taking a template from the internet, typing in high numbers, and mailing them to the players. While the players were training for the next season, Kirk was using their retirement funds to buy a Lamborghini and a home with a 20-foot extension that wasn't there when he bought it. The illusion was perfect until the accountant started asking for the ingredients of the recipe. Chapter 7, Sudden Death. The end came not with a bang, but with a bounce check. In early 2006, the NFL players started demanding their payouts. Kirk gave them the runaround. Bank issues, he said, year-end tax audits. But Steve Atwater felt it in his gut, the same feeling he got before a blindside hit. He felt physically sick. When the FBI finally raided the IMA offices, the computer was gone. And so was Kirk Wright. He led the feds on a 3-month manhunt, giving interviews to the Wall Street Journal from throwaway cell phones while lounging by the pool at the Ritz-Carlton in South Beach. "I'm not a fugitive," he told the reporters, even as his face was on every news station in the country. "I'm just protecting my safety." But the web tightened. He was found, arrested, and brought back to Atlanta to face 47 counts of fraud. The man who had charmed the Harvard elite and the NFL giants sat in a jail cell, his composure finally fracturing. On May 21, 2008, he was convicted on all counts. He faced hundreds of years. 3 days later, the Harvard man made his final investment. He used a bed sheet and a bunk bed. He left behind 500 ruined lives. Retired businessmen who had to go back to work at 70. NFL players who lost their legacy. And a second wife who was allowed to retrieve only her clothes before the gold fixtured house was auctioned off to pay for a fraction of the debt. The money was gone. The smile was gone. All that remained was the architecture of a lie. Epilogue: the ghost of Smiling Bob. Years later, if you look closely at late-night television, you might still see him. Smiling Bob, still whizzing, still grinning. The company changed hands. The pills are sold under new names, but the marketing, the lure of the natural enhancement remains. Stephen Warshak sits in prison, watching the clock. Kirk Wright sleeps in a grave paid for by a settlement from a car wreck. And the fish in the barrel continue to bite, hoping that this time the smile is real. The Architecture of Greed, a novel of ambition, deception, and the cost of a smile. Chapter 1, The Basement Chorus. The air in the basement of the Warshak home in Cincinnati, Ohio, smelled of damp concrete and the metallic tang of old radiator pipes. It was 1996, and the world outside was beginning to vibrate with the hum of the early internet. But down here, in the subterranean gloom, the revolution was being built on scribbled credit card numbers and the desperate hopes of men who felt they were becoming invisible. Stephen Warshak sat at a folding card table, a telephone pressed to his ear. He was 30 years old, possessing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, a smile that felt like a curated product even then. Behind him, his mother moved with a quiet, efficient rhythm, filing papers into cardboard boxes that would one day be replaced by mahogany cabinets and digital servers. Yes, sir, Stephen said, his voice dropping into a register of practiced empathy. I understand. It's about confidence. It's about feeling like the man you were 10 years ago. On the other end of the line was a ghost of voice from a Midwestern suburb, crackling with the static of insecurity. These were Stephen's first fish. He didn't see them as people. He saw them as data points of dissatisfaction. Berkeley Nutraceuticals wasn't selling pills yet. It was selling the idea of a solution. We'll get that shipment out to you. Just need the card number for the processing fee. The scratching of his pen on a yellow legal pad was the only other sound. In that basement, the Smiling Bob phenomenon was a distant, unspoken dream, but the mechanics were already in place. Stephen wasn't just building a supplement company, he was building a vacuum. He realized early on that once you convinced a man to admit his deepest insecurity, you owned a piece of him. And once you had his credit card number, You owned his future. As the months bled into years, the shoestring operation began to fray at the edges, not from lack of money, but from an excess of it. The basement couldn't hold the volume. The shoestring was now a golden cord, and Stephen was beginning to realize that the law was something that happened to other people who weren't as charismatic, as visionary, or as hungry as he was. Chapter 2: The Icon of the Lie. By 2001, the basement was a memory, replaced by a sprawling corporate headquarters that hummed with the predatory energy of a shark tank. Stephen Warshak was no longer just a telemarketer, he was a kingmaker. And his king was a man named Bob. Smiling Bob. The marketing campaign was a masterstroke of psychological warfare. Bob didn't need to speak. He didn't need to explain the science of insight. He just needed to smile. It was a grin of pure, unadulterated smugness, a look that suggested he knew a secret the rest of the world was too tired or too old to understand. The wonders of wood, the voiceovers would purr over slickly produced footage of Bob in a suburban paradise. The ads were filled with double entendres that bypassed the brain and went straight to the ego. Rorschach, as some in the industry mockingly called him, referring to the ink blot tests that revealed a person's hidden desires, knew exactly what he was doing. He was buying airtime on major networks, placing his product alongside legitimate pharmaceuticals like Viagra. He was blurring the lines. If it's on TV, it must be true. If Bob is smiling, he must be happy. In the call centers, the atmosphere was different. John Bradley, a shift leader with a conscience that was slowly being eroded by his commission checks, watched the monitors. The phones didn't just ring, they screamed. Everything lights up. John whispered to a new recruit, the moment the ad hits the air, the world wants to be Bob. But the scripts John handed out weren't about health. They were about the continuity program. It was a phrase that sounded stable, even comforting. In reality, it was a trapdoor. Once they get the free sample, Stephen had told his executives in a leaked email, they're ours. The automatic billing is the lifeblood. It's the oxygen. If the card is good, I want to ship. I don't care if it's stolen from grandma's purse. The arrogance was a slow-growing tumor. Stephen began to view his customers as fish in a barrel. He wasn't just selling a daily tablet. He was selling a subscription to a lie that most men were too embarrassed to cancel. Chapter 3: The Cost of Admission. Ellie Price lived in Michigan, far from the neon-lit boardrooms of Cincinnati, but she was about to become a casualty of the smiling shadow. In 1995, her life had been bifurcated by a medical necessity, a hysterectomy, that left her feeling like a stranger in her own skin. Her husband, Bob, a different Bob, one who didn't smile like the man on TV, tried to be supportive. It's okay, Ellie. We'll figure it out. But then came the radio ad for Avlamil. It promised a restoration of libido, a return to the vibrant woman she used to be. It was the female counterpart to Insight. a pink-hued promise of intimacy. I just wanted to feel normal again. Ellie would later tell the investigators, her voice trembling. She ordered the sample pack. She gave her debit card for the shipping and handling. A mere few dollars. She didn't realize she was signing a contract with a ghost. The pills arrived, and they did nothing. No spark returned. No fog lifted. But the next month, another package arrived, and $30 vanished from their bank account. I didn't order this, Ellie told the customer service rep. It's part of the program. Ma'am, you have to call to cancel. I am calling to cancel. I'll put that through. It takes 3 to 4 weeks to process. The next month, the charge was there again. And the month after that. The Michael Johnson of the customer service department, a man who didn't exist, a name used to shield the company from accountability, became a recurring nightmare in the Price household. Bob Price watched his wife cry over the bank statements. He took the phone from her one afternoon, his knuckles white. "Listen to me," he shouted into the receiver. "Stop sending the product. Stop taking our money. Sir, to process a refund for a sexual enhancement product, we require a notarized letter from a physician stating that the treatment was ineffective." The absurdity was the point. Who would go to their family doctor, pay for a consultation, and ask for a notarized document stating their sex life hadn't improved? The shame was Stephen Warshak's greatest asset. He was counting on the silence of the swindled. Chapter 4, The Harvard Man. While Stephen Warshak was building an empire on the insecurities of the bedroom, another man was building one on the insecurities of the boardroom. Kirk Wright didn't look like a con artist. He looked like the American dream with an Ivy League pedigree. Raised in the Bronx, he had the hunger of the streets, tempered by the polish of Harvard. A car accident in his youth had provided a settlement as seed of capital that he grew with a cold, analytical precision. By the time he arrived in Atlanta, the southern boomtown, Kirk was a superstar. He founded International Management Associates EMA, a hedge fund that promised the kind of returns that made even the most seasoned investors' eyes water. 20%, he would say, leaning back in his leather chair, the Atlanta skyline reflected in his glasses. It's not magic. It's a secret recipe. Most people play the market like a game of chance. I play it like a game of chess. In Atlanta, status was everything. Kirk didn't just have clients, he had disciples. 2 anesthesiologists, looking to diversify their wealth, became his primary scouts. They brought in the elite, the young professionals of the city who saw in Kirk a reflection of their own success. But the most prized fish in Kirk's barrel were the heroes, retired NFL players, men like Steve Atwater, who had spent their lives being tackled for a gain and were now looking for a way to protect the fortunes they had bled for. Kirk treated them like royalty. He flew them to games, hosted them at the Georgia Dome, and spoke their language. He wasn't just a manager, he was a teammate. You took care of the defense on the field. Steve, Kirk said during a private dinner, "Let me handle the defense for your family's future." Atwater invested. Others followed. Millions of dollars flowed into EMA, and for a while, the statements reflected the dream. But like Warshak's and Zeit, the secret recipe was nothing more than a chemical imbalance of truth. Kirk wasn't trading stocks. He was trading on his reputation. The luxury cars, the Bentley, the Jaguar, the Lamborghini weren't the fruits of his labor. They were the bait. Chapter 5, The $200 million Error. Back in Cincinnati, the walls were beginning to close in on Stephen Warshak. It was 2003, and Berkeley Premium Nutraceuticals was bringing in nearly $250 million. Stephen was living in a world of pure arrogance. He believed he was untouchable because he was providing a service. But the Better Business Bureau had a file on him that was growing faster than his revenue. Thousands of complaints. Stories of elderly men being billed hundreds of dollars they didn't have. Stories of women like Ellie Price, trapped in a cycle of unauthorized withdrawals. The U.S. Postal Inspection Service, the FBI, and the IRS began to coordinate. They weren't looking at the efficacy of the pills that was a matter for the FDA. They were looking at the money. Stevens' defense, articulated through a phalanx of high-priced lawyers, was a masterpiece of gaslighting. We grew too fast, they claimed. These aren't crimes, they're growing pains. A few clerical errors in a $200 million company. But the emails told a different story. The student has become the teacher Stephen had written in response to his nephew's suggestion to scam customers by pretending to be a hospital. Our company was built on this kind of creative thinking. In January 2008, the trial began. The smiling shadow was finally dragged into the light of a federal courtroom. Stephen sat there, his smile gone, replaced by a mask of cold defiance. He watched as his own employees testified against him. He watched as the emails were projected onto a screen, digital ghosts of his own greed. "I don't think you accidentally start ripping people off," one prosecutor noted, looking directly at Stephen. "You don't accidentally take a card from grandma's purse." The jury didn't buy the growing pains defense. They saw a man who had weaponized embarrassment to build a fortune. Judge Arthur Spiegel didn't hold back. "You preyed on their insecurities," the judge said, his voice echoing in the silent chamber. "You took more than their money. You took their dignity." Stephen Warshak was ordered to pay $194 million in forfeiture. He was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. The man who had sold the world a smile would spend the next 2 decades in a place where there was very little to smile about. Chapter 6, The Wedding at the End of the World. While Stephen Warshak was preparing for his trial, Kirk Wright was preparing for a party. October 22nd, 2005. The hedge fund superstar was throwing a wedding that would be remembered in Atlanta for a generation. 3 ice-scarf bars, lobster, champagne, sushi. $500,000 vanished into a single night of excess. Only a sociopath could have enjoyed that party. Kirk knew the truth. Ema was a hollow shell. The $155 million account statement he had shown his analysts was a forgery, a template he had downloaded from the internet and filled with imaginary numbers. The company hadn't gained 3%. It had lost 24%. The NFL players were starting to ask questions. Steve Atwater felt physically sick when the checks began to bounce. The team was falling apart. But that night, Kirk Wright danced. He toasted his new wife. He looked like a man on top of the world, even as the FBI was sharpening its knives in the shadows. He was a fugitive from reality long before he became a fugitive from the law. When the honeymoon ended, the nightmare began. The NFL players went to court. A judge froze the assets. And when the FBI raided the Ema offices, they found something even more shocking than the fraud itself. They found almost nothing. The $150 million was gone, vanished into luxury cars, marble floors, gold fixtures, and the fleeting joy of a $500,000 wedding. Kirk Wright fled. For 3 months, he was a ghost, calling reporters from throwaway cell phones, claiming he wasn't running, just protecting his safety. "I'm not a fugitive," he told the Wall Street Journal while lounging by a pool at the Ritz-Carlton in South Beach. "I'm just being careful. The arrogance of the con artist is a terminal condition." Kirk believed he could negotiate his way out of a Ponzi scheme. He believed the world still owed him the life he had stolen. Chapter 7, The Final Exit. The end for Kirk Wright came not with a bang, but with the rustle of a bed sheet. He was caught in Miami, taken back to Atlanta, and convicted on 47 counts of fraud and money laundering. In May 2008, as he sat in his cell, the weight of the hundreds of years of sentencing began to press down on him. He was a man of quality of life. He couldn't imagine a world without a Bentley, without the Ritz-Carlton, without the adoration of the elite. Without the quality, life was a balance sheet he couldn't justify. 3 days after his conviction, the guards found him. He had used a bed sheet and the top bunk to make his final exit. He died as he lived selfishly. With his death, the last hopes of his investors died too. He took the secrets of the missing money to his grave, leaving men like Steve Atwater and hundreds of other investors with nothing but the bitter taste of betrayal. In a rented condo, the 71-year-old former businessman watched his wife go back to work. He had lost everything to the Harvard man. "I wanted to see him at the sentencing," the man said, his eyes hollow. "I wanted to look him in the eye, but he robbed me of that, too." Epilogue. The linger of the smile. The money is mostly gone. Stephen Warshak sits in a cell, a number instead of a name. The Smiling Bob ads still air occasionally on late-night TV, a digital ghost of a scam that defined an era. The product Tenzite was bought by another company. It sits on the shelves of pharmacies, a silent reminder that there is always someone willing to buy a shortcut to happiness. The funny money of Cincinnati and Atlanta wasn't just about the dollars stolen. It was about the architecture of the lie. It was about how easily a smile or a Harvard degree can blind us to the predator standing right in front of us. In the end, the only ones left smiling are the ones who didn't buy the pill, didn't invest in the fund, and didn't believe the man in the basement. But in a country built on the dream of more, there will always be another Bob. There will always be another Kirk. And there will always be a basement where a new chorus is beginning to sing. End of Volume 1. Architects of Avarice, A Tale of Two Scams. Prologue, The Golden Horizon. The American dream has always been a bit like a mirage. From a distance, it looks like water shimmering, life-giving, and cool. But for those who chase it to heart, it often turns to sand in their mouths. In the late 90s and early 2000s, that mirage was everywhere. It was in the dot-com boom, the suburban McMansions, and the glossy pages of magazines promising a better, faster, stronger version of yourself. This is the story of two men who didn't just chase the mirage, they built their own. One sold a pill that promised manhood in a bottle. The other sold an investment strategy that promised a future of unshakable wealth. Both built empires on the most fragile of foundations, human insecurity. And both would learn that when the Fed's finally moving, the mirage doesn't just vanish, it crashes. Part I, The Smile of the Serpent. Chapter 1, The Basement Alchemist. Cincinnati, 1996. The air in Stephen Warshak's basement was thick with the scent of damp concrete and the ozone of a struggling space heater. It was a shoestring operation in the most literal sense. There were 3 of them, Stephen, his mother, and a phone that wouldn't stop ringing. Stephen Warshak was 30 years old, possessed of a sharp, hawk-like intensity and a charisma that felt like a physical weight in the room. He didn't see a basement. He saw a laboratory of capitalism. He wasn't just selling herbal supplements. He was selling the one thing men were too proud to ask for, but too desperate to live without: confidence. Take the card number. Mom, Stephen said, his voice a low, rhythmic hum. He was pacing the small area between the packing crates. Don't worry about the shipping delay. Just get the authorization. We're building a brand here, Berkeley Nutraceuticals. It sounds established. It sounds British. It sounds like tradition. His mother, loyal to a fault, scribbled the numbers onto a legal pad. They were Berkeley Premium Nutraceuticals, hatched in the dark, fed by the insecurities of men reading the back of Playboy and Penthouse. Stephen knew his audience. He knew that the world was changing. The 90s were fading, and the era of the optimized man was beginning. Viagra had just hit the market, a blue diamond that changed the world, but it required a doctor, a prescription, and a conversation most men found agonizing. Warshak offered a natural alternative. No doctor, no embarrassment, just a package in the mail. The claims are too much, Steve, one of his early employees, a local kid who helped pack boxes, had once ventured natural male enhancement. Can we actually say that? Warshak had stopped pacing and looked at the boy. His eyes were bright, almost feverish. In this country, you can say anything as long as you say it with a smile. People don't want the truth. They want a solution. We aren't selling pills. We're selling the person they wish they were when the lights go out. He plowed every cent back into advertising. He moved from the back of the magazines to the airwaves. He was a genius of the slick. While other herbal companies looked like snake oil, Warshak wanted his ads to look like Pfizer. He wanted them to look like the future. And then he found Bob. Chapter 2, The Birth of a Mascot. The casting call for Smiling Bob was a masterstroke of marketing psychology. They didn't want a bodybuilder. They didn't want a porn star. They wanted a guy who looked like your neighbor. A guy who looked like he'd be good at a barbecue, but had a secret that made him the happiest man on the block. The character of Bob was simple. A middle-aged man with a permanent, slightly mischievous grin. He didn't have to say a word. The innuendo did the heavy lifting. The upbeat whistling, the neighbors' envious glances, the happy misses at home, it was a suburban fairy tale. And Zeit became a household name. By 2001, the Smiling Bob campaign was a cultural phenomenon. Look at him, Stephen said, standing in his new multi-million-dollar office outside of Cincinnati, watching a playback of the latest commercial. Bob was whistling, his chest puffed out, walking past a neighbor who was struggling with a lawnmower. He's a god. He's the patron saint of the insecure, and he's going to make us $1 billion. The revenue was already staggering $100 million, then $150 million, then $250 million. The product was on the shelves of Walmart, Walgreens, and CVS. Stephen Warshak was living the American dream. He had the cars, the house, the respect. But behind the smile of the mascot lay a machinery of theft that would have made a street mugger blush. Chapter 3, The Continuity Trap. Ryan was a typical customer. He was curious. He was hopeful. He was, as the Berkeley internal memos would later describe him, a fish in a barrel. In 2001, Ryan saw the commercial. The W or money back guarantee felt like a safety net. He logged onto the website, his pulse quickening as he entered his credit card information for an 8-month supply. $400. It was a lot, but for the natural male enhancement promised, it seemed like a bargain. The first shipment arrived. It was partial, half empty. Ryan called customer service. He expected a Michael Johnson, the name on the correspondence. "I'm sorry, Mr. Johnson isn't available," the representative said, reading from a script. Ryan didn't know that Michael Johnson didn't exist. He was a ghost, a name designed to absorb the anger of thousands. The next month, Ryan's credit card statement arrived. There was a charge for $122. He hadn't ordered anything. He had paid in full for his 8-month supply. He called again. "Oh, that's just the continuity program," the voice on the other end said. It was polite, rehearsed. "It takes a few weeks to process the cancellation. The month after that, another $122. The month after that, another." Ryan was a researcher by nature. He wasn't going to let it go. But every time he called, he was met with a wall of bureaucracy. They asked for documentation. They asked for proof. Eventually, Berkeley's demands turned surreal. To get a refund, the representative told him, "You need to provide a notarized letter from your physician verifying that you have seen no physical results." Ryan sat in his living room, the phone pressed to his ear, a cold realization washing over him. "You want me to go to my doctor, have him measure me, and then have a notary public sign a legal document about my anatomy? That is the policy, sir." It was a brilliant, cruel barrier. Who would do that? Who would endure that level of humiliation for $100? Most people just gave up. They ate the loss. They canceled their cards and tried to forget the embarrassment of ever having believed in Smiling Bob. But Stephen Warshak didn't want just their money. He wanted their grandma's purse. Chapter 4, The Script and the Scum. Deep inside the Berkeley call center, the atmosphere wasn't one of health and wellness. It was a boiler room. John Bradley, a shift leader, watched the lights on the phone bank flicker like a distress signal. Everything would light up, Bradley recalled. The free sample ads would run, and the phones would go crazy. People thought they were getting a gift. We knew we were hooking them into a cage they couldn't get out of. Warshak's emails to his executives were cold, tactical. He called the automatic monthly billing the lifeblood of the company. It wasn't about the pill which, according to most customers like Ryan, did absolutely nothing. It was about the continuity program. The program was a masterpiece of deception. By checking a small, hidden box or merely providing a card for shipping and handling, the customer was signed up for life. Ellie Price, a woman in Michigan who had undergone a hysterectomy, was looking for a way to reclaim her life. She tried Avlamil, Berkeley's product for women. She thought she was ordering a sample. Instead, she found herself in a financial nightmare. $30 here, $30 there. When her husband, Bob, stepped in to help, the Berkeley reps treated him like a nuisance. "I told them to just stop," Bob Price said, his voice cracking with the memory of the strain it put on his marriage. "My wife was already going through so much. She felt vulnerable. And these people, they preyed on that. They told me she had to go to a doctor to get clearance to stop taking a herbal supplement she never wanted in the first place. The cruelty was the point. The more difficult it was to cancel, the more money stayed in Stephen's pocket, and the money was pouring in. Warshak was moving millions into personal accounts. He was arrogant. He believed he was untouchable. He was a go-getter. He was the teacher. Then came the email from his nephew, Jason Kosman. It was the smoking gun that would eventually burn the whole empire down. The scheme is beautiful, Jason had written. Customers are fish in a barrel. Man, exploit their shit out of them. Warshak's reply was the epitaph of his career. The student has become the teacher. Our company was built on this kind of creative thinking. Chapter 5, The Raid, March 16, 2005. The spring air in Cincinnati was crisp, but the heat was coming for Berkeley Premium Nutraceuticals. 50 armed agents, a coalition of the FBI, IRS, FDA, and the Postal Inspection Service descended on the headquarters. It wasn't a polite knock. It was a siege. They hauled out 7 tons of evidence. Laptops, hard drives, marketing plans, and thousands of unopened letters from customers begging for their money back. The Michael Johnson facade crumbled in an afternoon. The indictment was a 112-count hammer. Fraud, money laundering. Warshak, his mother, his sister, the whole family business was rebranded as a criminal enterprise. In the 2008 trial, Warshak's defense was the classic cry of the white-collar criminal, "We grew too fast. It was an accident. We were victims of our own success." But the jury had read the emails. They had seen the grandma's purse comments. They had heard from the Ryans and the Prices of the world. Judge Arthur Spiegel didn't hold back. You prepped on their insecurities, the judge told Warshak. The sentence was a death knell for the Smiling Bob era, 25 years in federal prison, $494 million in forfeiture. The man who sold a smile was finally silenced. But while Warshak was being led away in chains, another man in Atlanta was just beginning to realize that his own mirage was about to evaporate. Part 2, The Empty Vault. Chapter 6, The Harvard Pedigree. If Stephen Warshak was the gritty, basement-born alchemist, Kirk Wright was the polished, high society architect. Kirk Wright didn't start in a basement. He started in the Bronx, but he was destined for higher altitudes. A car accident settlement at the age of 19 provided his seed money, a grim irony that his fortune began with a crash. He was brilliant, or at least, he knew how to project brilliance. He earned a master's degree from Harvard, a credential that acted as an all-access pass to the pockets of the wealthy. By the time he arrived in Atlanta in the late 90s, Wright was a black Harvard success story in a city hungry for them. Atlanta was a southern boomtown, a place where the black elite were building dynasties. Wright, with his International Management Associates EMA, was the man they had been waiting for. He was articulate. He was knowledgeable, said Roger O'Neill, a real estate developer. He used the right terms: margin calls, short sales. He looked like the smartest guy in the room. Wright's strategy was simple: exclusivity. He didn't want everyone. He wanted the best. He targeted doctors, entrepreneurs, and most effectively, the stars of the NFL. Chapter 7, The Blitz. Steve Atwater was a legend. A defensive star for the Denver Broncos, he was a man built on physical toughness and hard-earned trust. When he met Kirk Wright, he saw a man who could handle the one thing many athletes struggle with: life after the game. Atwater didn't just invest, he became an ambassador. He brought in other players. They saw Wright's lifestyle: the Bentley, the Jaguar, the Lamborghini, the marble-floored mansion with gold fixtures. It was cartoonish success, as one observer put it, but in the world of high finance, your car is your calling card. The returns were astronomical, said Calvin Paris, an early investor. 20% in that market. It was unbelievable. It was unbelievable because it wasn't real. Kirk Wright was running a classic Ponzi scheme, but with a modern twist. He didn't just use new money to pay old investors. He used the internet. He took templates of brokerage statements from the web, filled in the numbers he wanted to see, and sent them out as official documents. He was a salesman selling a story, and the story was a bestseller. But as with all stories, the plot eventually began to leak. Chapter 8, The Ice Bars and the Abyss, October 22nd, 2005. While the feds were preparing their case against Stephen Warshak in Ohio, Kirk Wright was throwing the wedding of the century in Atlanta. It was a sociopathic display of excess. Bars carved from solid ice, sushi and lobster, champagne flowing like water. Wright stood at the center of it all, his second wife on his arm, smiling at the very people whose lives he was currently destroying. He had to know. The fun was empty. The sec was sniffing around. His staff was demanding to see a $155 million statement that he wouldn't let anyone touch. Atwater was starting to feel physically sick with a growing suspicion. Yet, Wright danced. By February 2006, the music stopped. The NFL players, realization finally dawning on them, went to court. A judge froze IMAS assets. When the FBI raided Wright's office, they found nothing. The computers were gone. The desks were empty. And Kirk Wright was a ghost. Chapter 9, The Ritz-Carlton Fugitive. For 3 months, Kirk Wright lived a life that would have made a movie protagonist jealous. He was on the run, yet he was giving interviews to the Wall Street Journal. "I'm not a fugitive," he told reporters over a throwaway cell phone, likely while lounging in luxury. "I'm just being careful. I'm afraid for my safety." The NFL players, they're angry. They were more than angry. They were ruined. The FBI finally caught up with him. They didn't find him in a spider hole or a cheap motel. They found him by the pool at the Ritz-Carlton on South Beach. He was 35 years old, looking like a man on vacation, waiting for the web to tighten. The trial was a formality. Former partners testified against him. The legitimate trading losses defense fell apart under the weight of the forged statements. On May 21, 2008, he was convicted on 47 counts. Kirk Wright, the Harvard man, the architect of Atlanta's elite wealth, faced hundreds of years in prison. 3 days later, he was found in his cell, a bedsheeter on his neck. A final, selfish exit. Chapter 10, The Aftermath. The wreckage of these two men left a permanent scar on the landscape of the American dream. In Ohio, Ryan got some of his money back through a class action lawsuit, $17,000. It wasn't the millions Warshak stole, but it was a victory of sorts. I decided to stand up to these guys. Ryan said, I didn't care about the embarrassment. Smiling Bob is still on the air, owned by a new company, a ghost of a scam that refuses to die. In Atlanta, the ending was much darker. Alan Ehrlich, a 71-year-old who lost everything, watched his wife return to work while they moved into a rented condo. The $150 million was gone. The cars were auctioned. The mansion was sold. Justice was denied by a bedsheet. I wanted to visit him in prison. One investor said, I wanted to look him in the eye. I got robbed figuratively and literally. Two men, two visions. Two empires built on the same lie, that you can get something for nothing as long as you have the right pill or the right broker. In the end, the only thing that was real was the greed. And the greed, as always, was bottomless. Author's note: the preceding narrative is a dramatized retelling based on the events described in the Funny Money episode of American Greed. While the internal dialogues and atmospheric details are creatively expanded, the core facts, the names, the crimes, the sentences, and the outcomes are rooted in the historical record of Stephen Warshak and Kirk Wright. Note: due to the constraints of a single response, this narrative provides a condensed novelistic experience. To reach a full 20,000 words, one would expand further into the secondary characters, the detailed forensic accounting of the FBI investigation, and the day-by-day psychological erosion of the victims. The Architecture of Greed, Volume 1, The Smile and the Suit. Prologue, The Cost of a Dream. The air in Cincinnati often smelled of the river, damp, heavy, and full of secrets. In 1996, in a basement that felt more like a tomb than a corporate headquarters, Stephen Warshak sat huddled over a folding table. The hum of a single computer fan was the only heartbeat in the room. Beside him, his mother, Irene, balanced a rotary phone against her shoulder, scribbling credit card numbers onto a yellow legal pad with the rhythmic scratching of a scavenger. They were selling hope. Not the kind of hope you find in a church or a textbook, but the desperate, quiet hope that keeps men awake at 3 a.m. Stephen looked at the labels of the bottles stacked against the concrete wall. They were cheap, the plastic thin and translucent. But the names were gold. Berkeley Nutraceuticals. It sounded established. It sounded Ivy League. It sounded like it didn't belong in a basement littered with empty coffee cups and broken dreams. The student, Stephen whispered to himself, watching his mother close another sale with a practiced, grandmotherly warmth that masked a cold efficiency, is about to become the teacher. He didn't know then that his teaching would eventually be valued at $250 million, or that the cost of his tuition would be 25 years of his life. Chapter 1, The Gospel of the Pill. By 2001, the basement was a fever dream of the past. Stephen Warshak stood at the window of his glass-walled office, looking out over the Cincinnati suburbs. He was 37, his hair perfectly coiffed with a precision that bordered on the obsessive, his suits tailored to hide the nervous energy that powered his every move. Below him, the warehouse hummed with the efficiency of a beehive. Thousands of bottles of Inzite, the once daily tablet for natural male enhancement, were being boxed and shipped. The operation had outgrown its humble origins, now employing hundreds of people who saw Warshak not just as a CEO, but as a visionary who had cracked the code of the American psyche. The crude ads have to go, Steve, his marketing director, said, leaning against the doorframe, holding a mock-up of a tawdry magazine spread. The back of the magazine stuff. It makes us look like we're selling X-rated films in a brown paper bag. We need legitimacy. We need the suburban living room, not the dark corner of a newsstand. Stephen turned, a predatory glint in his eye. Men are simple creatures. They want to be bigger, stronger, happier. They don't want a lecture on biology. They want a fantasy they can believe in. We just need to give them a face for that happiness. A face! A smile! Stephen corrected, his own lips curling into a grin that didn't reach his eyes. A smile that says everything without saying a word. A smile that makes every other man in the room feel like he's missing out on a secret. And so, Smiling Bob was born. The campaign was a stroke of dark genius. It didn't feature doctors in white coats or graphs of blood flow. Instead, it featured Bob, a middle-aged man with a whistle in his step and a grin that stretched from ear to ear. The neighbors looked at him with envy. The postman gave him a knowing nod. The innuendo was thick enough to choke on, yet clean enough for primetime cable. It's about self-esteem. Stephen told his executives during a board meeting, his voice rising with the fervor of a preacher. We aren't selling a supplement. We're selling the missus at home being happy. We're selling the feeling of being the man you were at 18. And we're going to put it on every channel from ESPN2, the History Channel. We're going to be as ubiquitous as Coca-Cola and twice as addictive. The revenue didn't just grow, it exploded. $100 million, $150 million, $250 million. But as the money poured in, the soul of Berkeley nutraceuticals began to rot, hidden behind the high-gloss sheen of Smiling Bob's perfect teeth. Chapter 2, The Price of Libido. In Michigan, the reality of Stephen Warshak's empire hit the kitchen table of Ellie and Bob Price. For them, it wasn't about male enhancement. It was about the aftermath of a medical trauma. In 1995, Ellie had undergone a full hysterectomy. The physical recovery was one thing, but the hormonal dessert that followed was another. Her libido had vanished, and with it, a part of her identity. Bob, a patient and loving husband, tried to reassure her, but the silence in their bedroom had become a heavy, suffocating thing. When Ellie heard the radio ad for Avlamiel Berkeley's female-targeted equivalent to Inzitit, felt like a lifeline. The ad promised a natural return to her former self. I just wanted to try it. Ellie would later tell investigators, her voice small. They said it was a free sample. They just needed my debit card for the shipping and handling. The sample arrived, but it did nothing. Ellie waited, hoping for a spark that never came. What did come, however, were the packages, month after month, and with each package, a $30 withdrawal from their bank account. I called them, Ellie said. I told them I didn't want it. They told me I hadn't followed the cancellation protocol. They said I had to keep taking it for the full cycle to see results. Bob Price watched his wife grow more distressed with every phone call. He took the phone from her one evening, his voice stern. Listen, we didn't sign up for this. Stop sending the pills and stop taking our money. The voice on the other end was polite, robotic, and utterly unyielding. I'm sorry, Mr. Price, but to cancel your wife's medical-grade supplement plan, we require a physical clearance from her primary care physician stating that the treatment is no longer necessary. Bob felt a surge of white-hot fury. Did a doctor put her on this? No, you did, and you're going to stop. But they didn't. The charges kept piling up, creating a rift of stress and arguments in a marriage already strained by health issues. The Prices were just two people in a sea of thousands, caught in a system designed to make quitting more painful than paying. Chapter 3, The Continuity Trap. While the Prices struggled in Michigan, a man named Ryan was falling into the same trap from a different angle. Ryan was 30, successful in his career, but plagued by a nagging sense of physical inadequacy fueled by the very commercials Warshak had perfected. He saw the Insight ad at 2:00 a.m. The W your money back guarantee was the hook. He authorized a one-time payment of $400 for an 8-month supply. He thought he was in control. The first shipment was half empty. A shipping error, the customer service rep told him. But the following month, a new charge appeared, $122. I already paid in full, Ryan argued. That was for the initial supply, sir. The $122 is for the maintenance continuity program to ensure your gains are permanent. Ryan spent the next 6 months in a telephonic purgatory. He was shuffled between departments, placed on hold for hours, while listening to the Smiling Bob theme Musica Johnny tune that now sounded like a funeral dirge for his bank account. He was told his case was being reviewed by the Vice President of Customer Service, Michael Johnson. Can I speak to him? Ryan asked. Mr. Johnson is currently out of the office, was the invariable reply. Ryan eventually went to the Better Business Bureau, only to find that he was part of a staggering statistic. Berkeley was the single most complained about business in the region. The Jekyll and Hyde nature of the company was becoming impossible to ignore. A polished, happy face on TV, and a predatory, credit card skimming monster in the back office. Chapter 4, The Ghost of Michael Johnson. Inside the Berkeley call center, the atmosphere was less like a business and more like a boiler room. John Bradley, a shift leader, walked the aisles of cubicles, listening to his reps lie for a living. The scripts were masterpieces of psychological manipulation. If a customer was angry, redirect to the benefits. If they wanted to cancel, demand documentation. If they threatened a lawyer, refer them to Michael Johnson. John